do. You know, at some point,
We're live.
well, just about. We're almost live.
I haven't got the notif.
Okay. Well, we are almost live. You know, I think in the future though, I'm gonna have cool background music while people are waiting and looking at
Totally.
the thumbnail.
Totally.
Yeah. That way, it's like do
Okay.
do 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 do.
Notif crew.
If you guys are watching from the beginning, we
Hey, notif
we
just came through.
are
Here we go.
we are going to
Oh,
flip
sorry.
over flip over to the camera here in just a second, in just a minute.
The real test will be if Rodrigo
Where's
makes it.
Rodrigo?
Oh,
Okay. Here, I'm going to scare everybody. I'm going to turn on our video in 3, 2, and 1. Hey everybody, what's going on? Thanks for joining us. Say hi, Dan.
hey guys, how are you?
So today we're super excited about the conversation we're going to have. It's a pretty core conversation. It's something that Dan and I have talked about around many a campfire. And before we jump into the topic, which is considerations for building your overland platform or your overland vehicle, um, Dan is an engineer with Toyota. Dan, why don't you tell people just a little bit about what it is that you do and have done for quite some time?
All right. I've worked with Toyota Research and Development for quite a while, about 32 years, and I've had different parts of my career, mostly in powertrain and mostly in on the calibration side for engines and transmissions, but a lot of time spent on the evaluation side. And we did a lot of what we call drivability evaluations, which means we make sure that the car performed as intended according to the targets that get laid out during the planning and the research and the development process. That certain targets are set for acceleration and how it should drive, how it should feel. And then we finally take it out on the road and drive it around different roads, different elevations, different temperatures. I've spent a lot of time on almost every road in California in almost everything Toyota made for an awful long time, driving up and down hills and through Death Valley, through Lone Pine, over Tioga Pass. We went as far as Denver to do high elevation. We towed trailers and those types of things. Everything that the customer would feel, we tried to refine and make sure that it was as nice a vehicle as we could sell within the confines of the hardware. And I guess I should put that caveat out there because there was some notable hardware that never could do what we ultimately wanted it to do, but we made it pretty nice in the end anyway. So
Yeah,
it's
maybe
been
I.
a fun job. It's been a good run.
It's been fascinating talking to you over the years. One of the things that I gained a little bit of insight on was the quality testing around. The Land Cruiser is known. I drive a FJ80 Land Cruiser. So do you. And learning about the quality standards of that vehicle and why it's come to be known for its reliability. Maybe just for fun, before we dive in, you can tell us a little bit about the history there.
Land Cruiser was one of the first vehicles that really stamped Toyota's name in reliability, the history of reliability. And the Land Cruiser was always meant to do very difficult things all throughout the world. The Land Cruiser has always been a world vehicle, which just means it has to meet every requirement in every market that we sell it. We sell it in the Middle East, very difficult market. We, of course, sell it in the US. We sell it in Australia, very difficult market there. A lot of abuse, no, abuse is the wrong word, a lot of harsh use
Mm-hmm.
that's expected. And the Land Cruiser has always had just one notch higher expectation from the customer. And so the targets and the development design always was a little bit harsher, a little bit stricter than say the Sequoia of its time, or even the Tacoma and those other vehicles.
Right. And do they, when they're differentiating between the product lines, I guess they have different testing standards. Is that safe to say? Is that how that works?
I don't want to get in trouble here, but they have, every manufacturer has standards. Maybe I can speak in generalities.
Right.
Every manufacturer has standards, and a Camry is different than a Tacoma,
Right.
is different than a Land Cruiser, and a Land Cruiser is just the expectation is much higher.
Right.
And when we set targets for a vehicle, we have to understand that we have higher expectations of durability and longevity.
What that vehicle is going to be asked to do, based on what that vehicle is going to be asked to do.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so.
Well, let's say
go
hi
ahead.
to
Yeah,
everybody
say hi to
who's
some
jumped
folks. Yeah.
in
People chiming in.
to the
Oh, yeah.
live stream. What's up, chat? How are you guys doing?
Hey, chat.
We got New Mexico, North Carolina, Delaware. Let's see, Utah. Hey, Jack Walsh, how you doing? And Monterey, Florida. Hey, guys. It was good to see Ofer and Sir William were the first ones in.
How's it going, Ofer?
Yeah.
Hey, Sir William.
And
How you doing?
Irvine. Hey, it's Stoner. What's going on, man? Working class Overland. Hey, dude.
What's going on, Robert?
He says, Dan. That's all he says. And
Robert, it's good to virtually hear your voice, man.
yes. So what we're doing today is Dan's here to answer any and every question related to the building out of an Overland expedition style vehicle. This is your chance to ask. Rodrigo, you are late. This is your chance to ask any question. There are no dumb questions. There are no stupid questions. There are no ridiculous questions. I think Nick DeLuca has a ridiculous question, but that's okay. We're gonna let it through. And basically just anything and everything you guys can think of that's more on the technical side, like please throw it into chat.
Marital advice.
Absolutely.
Life coaching.
Questions.
Questions.
Sure. I'll
Dan,
I'll make something up.
Hey, first one right out of the gate. Lucas Long. Supercharger on an Overland rig or no?
Oh, that's a good question. I've got one on my FZJ80. Had it for a long time. It's done really well. I like the Supercharger because it adds power where it needs it. That engine is pretty gutless above about 4,500 RPM. It gets wound out pretty quick. So anything that you can have between 2,000, which is the stall point of the torque converter, up to about 4,000 RPM is really decent. And on my car, about 6 PSI boost is just about the sweet spot where it adds enough power and it doesn't overstress the transmission, which is my concern point in that vehicle, is the transmission. On any other vehicle, cost versus benefit, if you add a lot of weight and you need the extra power, or you're towing a trailer, check for me. Yeah, it makes sense. Turbocharger less so because of the response delay, the lag, the turbo lag, but I like a supercharger. Very expensive.
Yeah. Dan, tell us why you might know a thing or two about the superchargers and their use on your Toyota. There's a little bit of history there.
Yeah, it's kind of fun because I went to a show somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but there was a guy there with a Land Cruiser, an 80 series Land Cruiser, and he had this, he had his hood up and he had his version of the Supercharger. And I got talking to him because I was really interested in it. And then he told me the price and I thought, wow, that's out of my range completely. And fast forward a couple of years, I was working I was working in another building with TRD, where TRD was. They were across the sidewalk. And I became friends with a guy that was in the Supercharger program. And I said, We'll call him Bob because that was his name. Um, say, I think we need to supercharge, and I use the term we need to supercharge the Land Cruiser. And that time, the Land Cruiser was just gaining popularity. And so he sold it to his management with the idea that, you know, we could sell everything we make. So he used my car as the development vehicle. And he said to me that if he could use my car for a couple of weeks, you know, I could participate in the development. And so 3 months later, I get my car back, and it's got a supercharger on it. And that thing ran really well. That was before I put on a lot of the weight that I have on it now, but it ran extremely well. And that was the very first number one TRD branded supercharger in the market. And
Very cool.
as such, it doesn't have some of the more recent upgrades that they put on it during development. And as a matter of fact, I just had it gone through by a company at 140,000 miles. So I put 140,000 miles on it. I decided it was about time to get it rebuilt, and it's back to its old magic. It's good stuff.
Very cool. Dan, tell us. We probably have some more questions.
We have good questions coming in.
I want to hit one thing, but before we move on, and that is, tell us what it does to gas mileage, so people know the full trade-off.
Yeah, that's the trade-off. It's a good question. I didn't do anything with gearing. I run 33s on my truck right now, and it's stock gearing, and I get about 1 mile per gallon less. But it's very difficult to compare. But my estimation is I get about 1 mile per gallon less. But I am willing to pay that 1 mile per gallon to be able to pull over the grapevine at 55 miles an hour instead of 35. So.
Yep.
All right. Next question from Ofer: is Toyota planning to import diesel vehicles? What do you know?
What's the official word on that?
You didn't know you have to be running things through their PR, right?
I could get right up to my hip pockets if I'm not very careful. You know, I guess I can say that you might remember a couple of years ago that there was a scandal, and Volkswagen was involved in that scandal. I'm not going to call out anybody, but their initials are VW. And they were found to have stretched the rules a little bit on diesel emissions and fuel economy. And as a result, EPA jumped down their throat. And there was a couple other manufacturers under the microscope. And at that time, let me say we were very interested in the diesel market because we saw the potential. And then the exposure to the bad parts of diesel, the emissions, the particulate matter, it's really not very good for the environment, although there's some very clean running diesel engines, and they can make them very clean. It's just very, very expensive. Almost everybody that didn't have a diesel in the market at that time backed away. Mercedes is getting out of the diesel market in the US, and generally speaking anyway. Volkswagen ran like a scalded dog. Ram, Jeep, and I think there's a few other, of course, Cummins. There's aftermarket engines that you can buy for diesel. But EPA hates diesels. California Air Resources Board hates diesels. They're not the future. Let me say that. Okay. I don't think I'm going to get in trouble. Don't quote me.
Okay.
We have the
future's hydrogen.
Hey, let's move on. Got another question. Hold on. Do you foresee, this is from Stoner, do you foresee Toyota ever bringing back a solid front axle option back to the US?
No. And I think those are sadly, Jeep is hanging on because they've got such a loyal following. If they ever did an independent front suspension on a Wrangler, they might as well just pound that last nail in the coffin, because that's one of the things that really make the Wrangler special.
Mhm.
But as far as handling, ride comfort, weight, um, Toyota's not going to do it. Not in the U.S. anyway. So
All right.
I'm not a suspension guy, but of course, I'm
So-
very interested in that. So
That was kind of a sad
Yeah.
answer.
Well,
It's like, "Aw."
just the
I-
real
I
deal here,
campaigned.
folks.
I campaigned hard, but like I said, I'm not the suspension guy. And everybody looked at me and rolled their eyes when I said, "Hey, let's bring a solid axle FJ Cruiser back to the market," and they pushed me out the door backwards.
Well, hey, so one of the things we want to discuss, we want to continue taking questions as well, but sort of an overview in general, things to consider when building your overland vehicle, and maybe you can give us your perspective on that.
And then I'll say, hey, Nick, your question we're going to get to next.
Great. So just in general, you're building an overland platform. What are some of the considerations?
So I think the common opinion and the common advice for anybody that's spent any amount of money on a vehicle and used it is use it first. If you're interested in camping, if you've been camping and you think you want to go further back into the more remote sections, get a car that does that. Get a Subaru, a 4Runner, a Jeep, and then go do that and see what you like. Do you like the camping? Do you like the exploration? That's where you have to start, because I've seen a lot of guys that will build a vehicle based on popular opinion, and that's okay. I mean, it's a fun car, and that's what a lot of car culture is based around. But overlanding is really based on the adventure aspect of it. And so it's a little bit different when you build an adventure vehicle as opposed to a tuner vehicle or a hot rod, right? You're building a car to get you into places, and people say, yeah, that'll just get you stuck further away from help, right? More capable means the further away you are when you actually get stuck.
Right.
So you get out there and use it and decide what you want to do. Where is your comfort level in driving over big rocks, in driving up big hills, in driving on ledge roads? What's your comfort level? You might want to upgrade your vehicle with, at first you should always have good tires. You should have good tires no matter what. Probably day one, get good tires. And by good tires, I mean all-terrain tires that can take driving over relatively sharp rocks and non-smooth roads. And so you upgrade your tires, and then you start driving over these big rocks, and you decide, I really like my rocker panels the way they were. So I'm going to add some cheap insurance. And if anybody's ever had to have their rocker panels repaired, rock sliders are cheap insurance. They're $600, $800, $1,000. It's about $1,500 to have a rocker panel repaired, and probably more now. That was what it was 10 years ago. Rock sliders are good insurance. And then
Dan, I just want to chime in and let folks know that as soon as you go a little bit beyond what Dan's mentioned, which is to go out there on the shelf roads or what have you and go camping, as soon as you go a little bit farther than that, you're going to hit your rocker panels. It's like your rocker panels are the breakover angle. So as you know, I just want to emphasize that it is going to happen relatively quickly, probably sooner than you think. So it is cheap.
It's the first thing.
Yeah.
It's the first thing.
Yeah.
You come off a boulder that your tire clears and you fall right under your rocker panel. And that's just a sickening sound, because there's nothing scarier than the sound of bending sheet metal, because it just sounds like money. And so if you land on your rocker panels, I mean, your rock sliders, you think, yes,
Yeah.
money saved already, right? And then it's fun. And then you grind them on the rock, and all you got to do is go home and get underneath with a black spray can, and you're good to go.
Yeah, and sliders not steps. There's a difference. Make sure you're getting actual rock sliders, not steps.
Joe Moore was asking stock 96 FJ80. What should I do first? So it sounds like you kind of just answered that in general. Tires, sliders, cheap insurance.
And I guess it's worth mentioning that depending on tire size that you want, a lift may be required, right? Because if you want to go +1 or maybe +2 tire size, you may need to get a lift. And does your vehicle, how easy is it to lift your vehicle? Are there parts off the shelf available? Or are you going to have to go out and wind your own springs and create your own struts and put in spacers and all that?
Let's go. I'm gonna segue to the next question from Nick DeLuca, because he does everything subtle, right?
Yeah, he is known to be
Captain Subtle.
So Mademan925 on Instagram. You can go and see some of his builds and his projects.
Okay, what do I need to beef up on an 80? Sorry, let me rephrase that again. What do I need to beef up on an 80 to run 38-inch tires and take it on trails like Ducey or Rubicon or specific sections?
Fordyce.
Yeah.
38s. I've seen there's a lot of guys on Instagram that are going hog wild and putting in, they're basically back halving their 80 series and putting in bypass shocks and the whole deal. That's really cool. But then that becomes a very dedicated rig at that point. And that would be fun to build. I would like to go up and help Nick do that, because I love to spend people's money, and we could build something really cool. But 38, the wheel arch, there's a limitation there. So you have to aggressively tune it with clearancing, and you have to be able to sacrifice this is my opinion. I've seen 37s done without a lot of clearancing. Actually, 37s with subtle clearancing, and it's nicely done. It's tastefully done with, I think, a 6-inch lift. I think the one I'm thinking about has a 6-inch lift, and Kings, and I don't think he's done any body modifications really on the outside, clearancing on the inside and things like that. But that's anything over 37s is quite demanding on an 80 series. If you want to keep it stock looking, comfortable riding, relatively stock, and by stock I mean, you don't go crazy on the rear suspension and have to do all the driveline modifications and everything. Anything over 35s, you're going to need a double cardan drive shaft, and that's sort of a given these days if you have any type of vibration.
What did you mean by subtle clearancing?
The inner wheel wells, you're going to hit the inner wheel wells. You're going to rub inner wheel wells, and it depends on your back spacing on your tires too. Mm-hmm. You just how does the phrase go? Dent to pound to fit, dent to match, or something. I don't know. There's some little cliche. You go out and try it, and you think, oh, got to rub. You get the hammer out or the sawzall out, and you by subtle I meant that you don't radically change the outward appearance of the fender lines, I guess.
And then going back to Nick's question, he wants to know what are the weak points, hub, stud, steering, etc. If he was,
well, the driveline, with a double cardan, that pretty much solves the driveline vibration. Caster angles is can be cured as well. You want the right caster angles so it doesn't feel like a horrifying thrill ride when you're going down the freeway at 60 miles an hour. If you choose the right gearing, it's fairly easy on the drivetrain. I wouldn't worry about 38s or 37s with like 456 or maybe 488 gears. I tend to be more conservative on guessing or giving recommendations for gearing when people want to match a bigger tire size. Some people go, oh, 529s, that's the answer. And, then they're going down the freeway at 55 miles an hour and they're going 3,500 RPM. And it's just unbearable. Those aren't real numbers, but it's, they can think that more gearing is better. But what you want to do is find that sweet spot. And the sweet spot is, in my opinion, one diff ratio higher than the current stock is. That's really the sweet spot because it puts it more into the power band. So 37s with probably 488s, I'd have to do the math, but you'd probably do really well. And by that, I mean keeping the load off the transmission and the engine from revving too high at highway speeds, that type of thing.
Right on.
Cool.
Lucas Long says, beat it to fit, paint it to match.
Beat to fit, paint to match.
It's good.
Yeah, something like that.
Yep.
That'll work.
Somebody's asking, Robert Brand is asking, should blinker fluid be changed before and after an overlanding trip?
Only if the muffler bearings are going bad.
Okay.
Blinker fluid is crucial if the muffler bearings are shot. So other than that, blinker fluid's fine.
Bob Brand.
Bob's
Bob.
muffler
was
bearings
that?
go. Bob's muffler
got
bearings
perpetually
go
bad muffler bearings.
Yeah,
I've
they
heard
go
of muffler bearings. They're terrible.
all the time. Yeah.
Okay, back. Lucas says Bob should go fluidless.
All right.
Best upgrade he ever made.
Yep.
Nick says thanks. And
Call me Nick.
I'm gonna jump in here with possibly some quick questions, some not so quick. Hold on. Let me go back. Sorry, guys.
We're going to talk about, so we're building our overland rig. We're considering what it is that we want to do. It doesn't matter what you drive, but it does matter where you drive it, depending on what you intend for that vehicle. You already mentioned, if you want to go in the backcountry, to get a vehicle that will do that. We talked about sliders. We talked about tires. We talked about a possible lift if we want oversized tires. So now we're getting a little bit higher up on the vehicle. So should I do a light bar or a winch first?
Stop it. Yes.
Or what? As we go up the vehicle, what is the next considerations as we go a little bit farther?
So protection is probably the next step up the cost benefit ratio ladder. Mm-hmm. Protection will make you feel better. It will give you more nerve. You start bending stock bumpers, even if they're metal bumpers, that feels really bad.
Yeah.
And mostly stock bumpers are what we call damage multipliers, which means if you hit a rock with your bumper, it then pushes your bumper into your sheet metal, and that just costs lots of money.
Yeah. And
so you get a nice steel bumper. I love the ARB. It's way overbuilt, but I love my ARB because I have hit that thing on rocks and come down on rocks, and I've actually been at an angle sliding down where the side of the hill, I was sliding down on the headlight bar on my front bumper, and I didn't worry about it. If that wasn't there, it would have been the body, right? So yeah. Bumpers, and what do you want your back bumper to do? The tendency for quite a while was to hang your spare tire off of it and hang a bunch of stuff and hang a bunch of fuel. I think people are kind of going away from that a little bit, but it's a matter of personal taste, but it's about the protection. And then over and above that, if you want swing outs, that's fine. But really, it's about the protection. You want to be able to come off that rock from your tire and land on a rock and not feel bad about it.
Well,
Because it can be sanded and repainted real quick.
yeah, that's, I mean, on the 80, the departure angle, my rear bumper and the skid plates that are incorporated in that rear bumper are a part of my suspension, basically.
Absolutely.
I mean, I drag bottom going over just all kinds of trails. So,
And as long as you got traction, you keep dragging that bumper just as
Yeah.
long as you need to, right?
Hey, here's a question. I'm gonna trying to find good balances between like super technical with somebody who's new to the conversation coming in and feeling like it opens up the conversation rather than makes them feel shut out. So,
and if you are welcome,
I'm
Yep, welcome.
so this is from Bronze.
Talk to so many people like that, I love having those conversations.
So Bronze wants to know, I'm about 2.5 years into my build. When do I know it's heavy enough to regear?
Regear, I guess, means differential ratios. When you're no longer happy with the performance is the simple question, or is the simple answer, right? If you're driving up a hill that you used to drive over with no stress, and suddenly you've added a winch or 10 gallons of gas, or you've increased your tire size and you can't climb that hill anymore, maybe it's time to regear. And then you do the math and make sure that you get the numbers right and put some new gears in it.
Tell me about that, Dan. Tell me about getting the numbers right.
So the diff ratio and the tire size are all part of your overall gear ratio, right? So the factory says they do so much of drivability and capability of a vehicle is based on the gear ratios. So you don't want to mess that up too much. If you add larger tires, you change your gear ratio. If you then compensate for a larger tire with a couple of ranks higher differential ratio, that overcomes that. And so you want to make sure that the power band stays in the same area. And these days, the power band is not necessarily where vehicles drive because they want to get the maximum fuel economy. They're trying to maximize the fuel economy. So you want to know where the power band is for your vehicle. And an easy way to do that is to go out on a flat road and accelerate at about 50% throttle. And then you just interpret with the seat of your pants how it feels as you watch the RPM go through its range. Where does it feel like the power is really the best? And, it might be 5,000 RPM, 6,000 RPM. You don't want to run in that area, but you do want to optimize the area where your engine has its best power and torque. So you do some numbers, and there's a lot of calculators online and stuff where you plug in stock ratio and stock tire size. And then if you want to increase to this tire size, it tells you what diff ratio will maintain the same engine speed at a given vehicle speed, those types of things. It gets very really into the weeds really quick, but talking to someone who's done it a couple of times, and then you decide, am I willing to give up a little, am I willing to hear the engine more, or do I want to maintain my fuel economy? If you're willing to hear the engine a little bit more, go up one more diff ratio set, and you'll enjoy a little bit more power, probably. Typically, I should say. But if you want to hit that same number that the factory does, you go up, say 2 tire sizes, you go up 1 differential rank, and you probably are in the same zone as far as the RPM. And unfortunately, Toyotas don't allow you to go in there and change the speedometer ratio like a Jeep does. A Jeep you can just reprogram for a 35 or a 37-inch tire. Toyota doesn't allow you to do that. Toyota is very proprietary about their software.
Just a real quick real world scenario with my 80 series. I don't tow a trailer, but I did go from 33s to 35s, and I put some weight on it, and it's got that thing called the power button. And the adjustment that I made between the 33s and the 35s was to push that power button, and I run with that 100% of the time. I'm good. So I haven't re-geared. I run 35s. I run with the button on, which you might advise me against. And that's been pretty satisfactory with the weight that I carry. But I'm not, I would need to re-gear, I know, if I had a trailer or something like that. I'm still satisfied with the power that I get right now.
Well, I know you well enough that you are very careful about how much weight you add too. Mm-hmm. You are very particular about how much things weigh before you put them in your car. So that's really important, because the more weight you have, think of it in terms of the weight of a person. Say a person weighs 100 kilograms or 220 pounds. Something along those lines. You could go find a husky friend and say, let's go for a ride up the hill and I'll see what that extra 220 pounds does for my performance. And then that width of weight that you can add without sacrificing too much.
Go ahead.
Husky friend. Okay. A full-grown adult.
Our campfire.
A full-grown adult.
How can you be offended? I'm not offended when somebody calls me. It used to be a compliment, but now at my age, it's not such a compliment anymore.
Go find.
You've never called
go
a girl
find
husky.
a nice. Correct.
Yes, there you
Correct. Okay. Here's kind of nerd question.
You're just
I think
called
it is. Major weakness wants to know, what is the best year 4Runner for under $15,000? Or can you even get a high mileage one for under $15,000? But best year 4Runner under $15K, go.
That's the question. Can you find them? The 4Runner that I really like is the second generation 4Runner from, what was that, 90 to 95. I like the body style of that. It's a little 80-ish, Land Cruiser-ish in its feel. But I love the 3.4. I am not crazy about the 3.0, but the 3.4 V6 was a good engine. Had enough power as long as you didn't overload it. And of course, the 4-liter, the 1GR 4-liter in the last generation and this generation 4Runner is a good engine as well. But my favorite all-time 4Runner, and I think you can get them for under 15,000 if you can find them. And because they're a little bit rare, they're probably a little bit more pricey, is the V8 4th gen 4Runner. The 2UZ is the new high mileage winter champion motor. I call it a motor engine within Toyota. That's the great engine. So if you can find a V8 4Runner in a sport edition or something like that, that's really the sweet spot as far as I'm concerned. I think they're out there for less than 15. I'm not sure.
All right. Solo Saga, just wanted to say, hey, thanks for all you do and the excellent content. No problem, sir. Thank you. Let me look here. Hold on.
Look at all those questions and comments.
there's lots.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it.
Let's talk about gasoline for a minute.
Okay.
Dan, you got some constructive, critical feedback from somebody.
Oh, I can't imagine who that might be. Mason.
No. Talon wants you to know that your speeches are like a lot of nothing.
I've been told that.
Thank you, Talon. We'll pass it
That's
fully on.
that's
to...
30% of the feedback I get. Sure.
I have staff that tell me that all the time, so my feelers aren't hurt at all.
Dan, let's talk about gas.
Yeah.
What about gas? Let's talk about it.
So I see a lot of Forerunners now, and I don't know if Tacomas, but Forerunners and Jeeps, Wranglers are putting on the auxiliary gas tanks. And that to me is the really great way to do that. I'm really, I don't want to say afraid of gasoline hanging off the back of a car, but I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
You know, rear end collisions are fairly rare, but they happen. And if I get hit in the back and I've got 5 gallons of gas, that's a problem. You know, especially if it's relatively unprotected. So that's a good idea. It not only puts your center of gravity down much lower, but it increases your range tremendously. I've got one in my 80 series, and it was pricey at the time, but it's paid for itself, because if I find cheap gas, man, I'll fill that thing up right to the limit, and you know, I can go 650 or 700 miles before I need gas again. So
is that a 40 gallon, Dan?
It's a, what is it, a 43, 42 gallon capacity with just a transfer pump. Very simple system. And it's great. The problem is my rear departure clearance is suffers a little bit. And you can tell if you just take a look under there, that tank is pretty dented. I've landed on more than a couple of rocks, but it's very durable, and boy, I love the range.
That's something I would love to do with my rig. I'd love to get an auxiliary tank.
Yeah, you've got the space under there. There's nothing living under there right now. So
Yep. All right. We have any other questions?
Oh, there's just a random one. Hey, is a California smog legal turbo available for the 97 FZJ 80?
I believe so. Yes, from a company called Wits End. Call Joey at Wits End and he'll hook you up. That is a really nice turbo from what I've heard. I haven't driven one. I've driven a turbo FZJ80, but not his. But he does meticulous development, and he's very picky about the parts quality. I wouldn't hesitate for a minute to put one of his turbos on a Land Cruiser.
All right.
Tell us a little bit, just from as you approach your vehicle, as you approach your overland rig, maybe an example or two on your own builds of form following function.
Lights are a big thing for me, I guess, as far as that's concerned. I have lights on the front of my car because I occasionally drive very dark roads at night, but I don't need a lot of lights. I don't want to illuminate the planet so much so that I guess I just feel like I don't need that ability. I'm not a real nighttime rock crawler person. When the sun starts going down, I sit in the camp chair in front of the fire mode. But I know a lot of guys love to go out and go four-wheeling at night, and it is a whole new spectrum of four-wheeling for sure. But lights are one of those things where add what you need, know what you need, and then go out and find it. I'd like to have good equipment that's not going to fail when you need it most. And so when I tried some spotlights in the front bumper, they worked pretty well. And I knew that, hey, these are going to be useful. So I threw away the $40 lights that were there, and I went out and got some really nice Baja Designs spotlights that just changed the whole driving experience on dark roads at night. And that's all I need. That's all I need. Lift and tires are another thing. You know, it used to be many years ago, the thing to put big suspension and big tires on, I need 33s. I could probably use 35s, 35-inch tires, but that puts me into another realm of suspension and things like that. So, you know, get what you need to get you where you want to go. How about that?
Yep.
Hey, Chris White, for those joining in this conversation, first of all, thank you for being here. This conversation is an ask anything, no stupid questions. In fact, it's if you have a question that, because you're new to this, you're new to the idea of modifying a vehicle, of making changes, this is the place. This is not, if you're a veteran at this, awesome. But we're wanting to get people to start asking questions.
Considerations for building your overland rig or your adventure vehicle. Again, we're talking with Dan Rich, who is a Toyota R&D engineer, mostly with powertrain.
So Chris White would like to know, could you maybe discuss some more about rear bumper design, main things to look for, etc.?
If it looks pretty, run.
Okay.
I'm gonna let Dan answer.
Yeah, that's a tricky question. You want it to look nice, right? But what you want to also do is probably improve your, first of all, protection. Let's just get that out of the way first off. If you put a steel bumper where there was once plastic, you're going to have better protection. But if you land on the corner of that bumper with the full weight of the vehicle and it bends and it pushes up into the sheet metal, you've wasted your money. So you want a bumper that's heavy duty enough, whether it's steel or aluminum. You want it built well enough that it's not going to bend under those circumstances. It should be able to take the full weight of the vehicle on a hit like that. And then the next thing you probably want to think about is departure angle. Are you going to make your departure angle better or worse by a particular bumper? And by worse compared to stock, for example. Some vehicles, the limitation is a trailer hitch. You know, you've got a 2-inch ball or a 2-inch square socket there, and that's the first thing that's going to drag after you, or as you go down a transition from steep to flat. It's not a bad thing. They can take it. It scrapes them up. It will very rarely bend them if you're careful. So that's good. You know, can of spray paint and you're good to go. But you want to be able to do that on all areas of that bumper. And you want the bumper to be able to take it. And then, so you've got protection and you've got clearance or departure angle, and then you've got cost. There are crazy expensive bumpers out there that look really nice. And it's a tough market, because to build a bumper takes a lot of development time and a lot of trial and error and a lot of manpower and a lot of time. And then the market is, you can imagine, fairly small. They sell, you know, a couple hundred bumpers, maybe. I don't know what their market is, but they're not in the thousands of bumpers. They're in the hundreds, if that. So their profit margins are very small, I'm sure. But if you want to add protection and departure angle, then it's time to consider a bumper.
Okay, this one just came in, and if I add a front locker, should I strengthen any suspension components since it's not manufactured to have one there?
Suspension components, I think the only thing I would worry about is, considering mechanical sympathy, you want to get good chromoly axle shafts. And if you put it on a front differential and it's got independent front suspension, invest in some good chromoly axle shafts with the CV joints that can take the extra stress of that a locker will create. And then I guess the thing that is the biggest problem is people tend to lock those too soon and unlock them too late. With a front locker especially, they impact your steering to such a level that you don't want that front locker locked for any longer, not a second longer than you have to have it. If you just need to stop that wheel that's in the air from spinning and get that wheel that's on the ground some traction, as soon as that spinning wheel gets traction, turn that locker off. Because as soon as you do, you're going to need to start steering, and it's very difficult to steer with your front locker engaged. So,
yeah, Nick is chiming in. Everyone I've seen repeatedly use a front locker on an IFS vehicle has broken axles, gears, and tie rods, etc.
Yeah, pinion gears. Pinion gears are notoriously weak, especially if you go up to a real high diff ratio, high numeric diff ratio.
It's worth mentioning that a rear locker will get you along, quite a ways the way there. It'll get you out of most situations if you're just able to lock the rear. We both have both front and rear lockers, and the rear locker is where it's at. Maybe every once in a blue moon, you might engage that front locker, but not too frequently, for me at least.
Right. Exactly true.
Here's another question that kind of encompasses what we're trying to address. To carry my spare larger tire, I'll have to buy a rear hitch carrier. The spare tire hitch and a winch cost about the same and are both my next steps. Which should I do first? It's kind of like we need an order of operations.
So the question is, do I buy a tire carrier or a winch? Boy, that's a tough call for. I have a winch. I've used it a couple of times, and almost. Is that true? I've been pulled out with a winch before, Bob Brand. I have pulled people out with a winch. But I've never used my winch for myself yet.
You haven't used yours because we're always pulling you out, Dan.
Yeah, I know. There's always somebody there. There's always somebody there that's willing to pull me out. Hey, all right, I'll give you that. But I would say if you need, your spare tire won't fit in its stock location. That's, I guess, what I'm assuming. So if a hitch carrier is your only option, those are neat. They're very utilitarian. They swing out of the way, they lock in place, but they also decrease your departure angle. You're going to be dragging that thing way before you dragged the factory receiver hitch. And that's something you may not want to damage. I don't see those two things as creating the same amount of improvement in that vehicle. A winch will give it more capability. A spare tire carrier will. I don't know. It doesn't improve the capability as far as I can see.
Okay, hang on. Kent just texted us to say we've been on for 50 minutes.
Is he telling us we need to wrap this show up?
What does that mean?
Kent.
What does that mean?
Thank you, Kent.
He's saying, "Come on."
I know. We are. We'll try and do some quick hits here.
Quick hits and then some summary.
What's your take on large rooftop tent on lifted rigs? Any concerns for center of gravity? I'm debating on getting a rooftop tent. Go.
Yeah, rooftop tents are heavy. They weigh anywhere from 140 to 180 pounds. And to have that much mass up there on top of your roof doesn't matter until you go on some trails that it matters. And then you begin to really find out how, I was going to say something I won't, how nervous you get when you start to approach the rollover angle. And your rollover angle changes dramatically. It should be about 35 degrees with a rooftop tent, that much weight up there. I imagine, I would be worried at 25 degrees. But I haven't tried it. If you don't go places where you're going to where you're going to drive like that. You'd never go on a trail that you'd get that tippy. Yeah, I wouldn't think that that's a problem.
Okay. Let's see. I saw Neil. Hey, Neil. Hi, how are you? Question, I have a 97 4Runner with about 2.5-inch old man emu suspension upgrade. Are there better CV boots than stock? Should I use aftermarket or not?
He's talking about his front axles?
I believe so.
Yeah, I mean, if you can afford the big bucks, the RCV axles are the best in the business, I think, but they are expensive. But they're probably the last ones Neil might buy, knowing how Neil drives his truck. But they're expensive. And the boots the boots fail because they are driven at an angle that they weren't designed to do. And RCV axles, I think, have a little bit tougher boot.
All right. Somebody wants to know who's Dan Rich.
Yeah, who am I? Really?
No, let him know
Yes,
again. Just let him know again, Dan. Just because people are jumping in.
Dan is Dan's a Toyota R&D engineer, working mostly in powertrain for the last 32 years or so. A long history with Toyota.
Yeah, this is like a radio.
And I've been
show.
a
We have
Toyota
to,
guy
reintroduce
for a
every
long
20
time.
minutes.
Yeah,
no, it is. Yeah, and actually, for you guys just joining, it's true. We should have a little label on here. We'll work on it. We'll improve our deal. But yeah, Dan and I asked Dan technical questions about my FJ80. He also drives an FJ80. He's a Toyota engineer. And oftentimes it turns into a charts and graphs and formulas written on my windows
Literally.
of the 80. I had a drawing on there for many months of something that Dan something about. Anyway, I don't even want to get into it. But anyway, Toyota R&D engineer.
I think that was the oxygen sensor signal I was trying to talk about or something, wasn't it?
That's right. Yep.
Chris Yetter says you're a silver fox.
Well, he's spent 30 minutes on that gel before he got onto.
It's coming in.
All
right, we're at an hour.
Okay, you guys, we're at an hour. We're gonna wrap things up. Hey, so here's what I'm gonna say. Dan does.
Hold on, really quick.
Sure.
Nick is saying, and this is true, we have photographic evidence of it. Dan can fix a steering rack in the woods with baling wire. He is the man. That's what we should do next.
That is correct.
What is your, just get her off the mountain kit?
Yep. Yeah, that's tough.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
Hey, so what I was starting to lead into is, Dan, like many of the folks that are watching, many of our friends that are watching tonight, really demonstrates, the great part of our community, which is to help one another and provide information to one another so that you guys are all prepared when you do decide to adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Community, we encourage people to find adventure. We think it's necessary to have that balance in life. And so, we're here to answer questions no matter what your level of experience is. And we do that here with Dan. And when we get together and, on the forums or wherever you happen to engage with the community. So, Dan, thank you very much for tonight. Thanks for spending the time with us.
Yeah, Dan, is there a way people could possibly reach out to you on the forums, maybe if they need a follow-up question or clarification?
Yeah, I come and go on the forums. Sometimes I'll spend quite a bit of time on the forums. Other times I don't spend a lot of time in front of the computer at all. That would be a good place. I guess we'd have to establish something.
But with the recent release of our Overland Bound 1 app, which is available for both iOS and Android, which is free to download. Dan is VC Expedition on Instagram.
Yeah.
You can
that's true.
You can chat with Dan on Instagram at VC Expedition, and you're also VC Expedition on Overland Bound, aren't you?
On the forum, yeah. I just downloaded OB1 on my new phone because suddenly I have room for it.
Yeah.
Hey.
Great. And boy, it's nice. I'm excited about the map.
Good. Well, the map's just going to keep getting better. We're just getting started. Just so you guys know, I'm not going to derail the conversation.
M70 Hornet says we did a shameless plug.
Yes, we did. Yes. Every once in a
lot of
while,
shameless
every once in a while, we will do a shameless plug. Very rarely, though. I hardly ever talk about becoming a member, getting a cool T-shirt, or downloading our free app. I hardly ever talk about that stuff.
Chris, your questions, Chris Lucero, send them over to. You had a lot of good questions, man. Use our forums. Hit me up, CORRIE. It's literally just at CORRIE, especially like on the food. You had great stuff. And I see your downtrodden emoji, and we want to answer your questions.
And hear you.
Also, Gen 5 Runner, definitely hit him up on the forums. I'm committing you, Dan, to like go to your DMs.
Yeah. Now that I can do that on the phone, I've got no excuse.
Yes.
So I'm there. All right. I love having those conversations.
Great.
Yeah,
All right, you
everybody's at it's good. Okay, wait. Gen 5 Runner, he's saying please.
What
all
is it?
caps.
What's the question?
Please.
What's the
Ready,
question?
Dan?
Ready.
Okay. I'm going to vent my rear diff. Should I vent my transaxle, transmission, rear locker, etc.?
It was rear locker in there. There was too many things there. Rear diff. You need to vent anything with that'll be underwater. So if you're along with your rear diff, which your rear locker is part of your rear diff, doesn't require any separate venting. Transaxle, yes, if it's got a vent that's only sitting on top of the transaxle itself, vent that up to the same location. Front diff, absolutely. Transmission usually vents through, an automatic transmission usually vents through the dipstick. Manual transmission does have a vent, so look for that. But yeah, let's keep water out of anything with oil in it.
There you go.
So that's the generally accepted rule.
All right.
All right.
Thanks for squeezing that one.
And
in.
that's cheap. That's a cheap, fun mod to do.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
get it up there on your firewall and call it good.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Hey, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for hanging out
Thank
with us, and
you.
Dan, thank you for hanging out with us as well and answering
My pleasure.
questions.
Thanks.
Really appreciate it. We'll
The
pick some
chat.
topics in the near future.
Chat, you were very well behaved.
Thank you, chat.
Thank you, chat.
You guys are an awesome community. Thanks for hanging out with us. All right, you guys. See
All
ya.
right.